just thinking of something that you're grateful for. And bringing that sense of gratitude into your heart. And let's fill this space with gratitude. Beautiful. Welcome everyone to Toci Austin, and welcome all the global folks that are joining us as well. What a delight. So I'm going to ask Coral to come up and do intros.
Hi, I'm Coral Nunnery, and along with Toltec, I'll be one of the moderators. And I have been really privileged to be part of the discussion that really created this morning, and I have to say that I'm really excited to have these three women in the same place at the same time. And I'm really excited about this topic, and I am also really honored to be able to introduce them to you. So at first glance, they appear to be really from vastly different traditions: Tibetan Buddhism, Native American, and Eastern European shamanism and Toltec paths. But looking more deeply, what I see are the similarities. And so these are women who've really walked their paths with incredible integrity and dedication, and their knowledge alone is really quite an accomplishment. But what their lives clearly reflect is that they walk their path, they live what they teach. The quality that truly distinguishes each one of them is the expansiveness of their hearts. And they care so deeply about others. These are women who are teachers, who have loved so many of us into new ways of being. I've really been overcome with gratitude this morning. So they are the teachers of our hearts. So Yeshe Wangmo is a teacher from the Tibetan Vajrayana tradition. Her Buddhist path began in 1978 at the age of 29 with meeting the 16th Karmapa and the Kalu Rinpoche. In the early 80s, she completed the first traditional 3-year retreat in the United States. She became a Lama, or an authorized teacher, in 1992 under the direction of Lama Tarchen Rinpoche of the Nyingma tradition of Dujam Rinpoche. As well, she is a translator, an author, and founder of Jamasuka, a nonprofit dedicated to the lineages of female Buddhas and female masters, particularly Yeshe Tsogyal, who lived in the 8th century Tibet, as well as other contemporary female masters. Today's event was inspired by Lama Yeshe Wangmo as part of her intention to communicate the message of the sacred feminine in the modern world. Judith Yost brings her love of nature and the embodied feminine to everything she does. She is Dean of Students at Wisdom University, a licensed psychotherapist and counselor, and the co-director of the Center for Creative Resources and EarthTribe. And HeatherAsh Amara is the founder of Toci and author of Toltec Path of Transformation and many more books. She is the creator of 13 Moons, a year-long women's circle, and is passionate about embodying and sharing the energy and wisdom of the divine feminine. And so the other thing that I would add about each of these women is they know how to create community. They know how to bring people together. And for that, I am extremely grateful. So, trading places. And this is what we'll take. We'll have a voice later. So, the first question. And notice the Virgo is the timekeeper, so. What is your personal connection with the sacred feminine? I'm just going to let you decide who wants to go first.
I'm happy to go first. Yeah. Well, what a great turnout. What a great alternative to Sunday school. Oh, yeah. Thank you all for being here. It's just wonderful. My personal connection with the divine feminine. Let me just check out. Is this the 5-minute thing, or this is just a quick? Okay. So we sort of want to divide this up in a really feminine way of sharing power and influence and being here. So, just give you a brief. I would just say off the top that my spiritual path now is, I would call nature-based spirituality or the medicine wheel way. So I'll talk a little more about that later. I was raised in a very traditional Christian family, Methodist, very moderate, middle of the road, really good. I liked it. I loved Jesus. I loved Sunday school. I loved everything about it when I was a kid. But as I got older, my path was, it just didn't fit for me anymore. I mean, it was, I got a little more enlightened, a little more conscious about the place of women in the world. And so I tried many different things. I looked into a lot of different spiritual pathways. And when I met Will, who is my spouse, he was a searcher too. I feel like I've always been looking for God in my whole life. Like, what is that? I just want it. I just want it if I can find it. And so just fast forward a bit, in the early 80s, Will was, because of his Native American heritage, had found a teacher by the name of Bearheart Williams from New Mexico, so Muskogee Creek shaman, and so we decided to participate in a sweat lodge. I'm sure most of you know what a sweat lodge is. And I would say that is one of the most life-changing events of my life, because I was just a neophyte, just naive. I didn't really know. I mean, I heard it, but so we went into this beautiful container of spirit, is what I would call it, sitting on the earth, nothing under our bodies. We were just on the earth, and participated in this womb of prayer, is what I would call it. And the sensual experience of the body being totally involved in a spiritual experience was very feminine to me, because I really think of the body as the realm of the feminine. Since we give birth, and the earth is our body, and so it's one of those experiences that is hard to describe in words, because it was such a physical and sensual experience. But coming out of that, we were living in Houston at the time, and this was up north around the Woodlands, somewhere up there. So we had kind of a long trek home, and I said, I don't know what just happened. I just cannot describe what just happened to me. And it was just so profound, there were not words to put to it. So from that moment on, and it's a long story, but we created a community that's now been together for about 30 years called the EarthTribe. And the EarthTribe is a nature-based spiritual community that is the only requirement to be a member of the EarthTribe is that you love the earth. So it's pretty easy to get in. So that's what I would say about my personal story, about where I am, how I got to where I am today in my spirituality. And I feel that it embodies the sacred feminine at a very, very profound place, very basic, profound place. Thank you.
So my connection with the sacred feminine, well, as we'll talk about later on today, the sacred feminine is really central principle of truth and of enlightenment in Tibetan Buddhism. And so I was connected to that through my connection with Buddhism, my teachings, having received teachings, doing meditation retreat in a serious way, let's say from 1980. But that really wasn't my connection. My connection really came about in 1997, when I just went through a crisis in my life where everything fell apart. And even though at that time I had been, seriously practicing since 1978 or since 1980, I was like, there was no resource for me in my own. What I had done just wasn't helpful to deal with the falling apart that was going on in my life. So I was quite surprised by that. But I had the idea one day to turn to the life story of a female master who lived in Tibet in the 8th century. Her name was Yeshe Tsogyal. she's a great spiritual heroine in our tradition. And luckily, she wrote her own spiritual biography that we have translated into English. So I started to read that story and was able to piece together how my life, the events were, similar, and follow her advice and how she dealt with her life. So I really started to merge with her life story as a paradigm for the whole, not just dealing with the crisis, but the whole spiritual path from until what we call, enlightenment. So that was the first really, I think, authentic connection, even though I had meditated female deities and loved that. The real personal, like, this is really happening, came through that crisis back in 1997. And then shortly after that, one of my most respected teachers, Tinley Norba Rinpoche, told me personally, everything that you need for your life is contained in the teachings of the female Buddhas, and I'll give you this book, basically. So it's all in there. And surprisingly, I said, well, gee, thank you very much. And I kind of put it aside. It didn't really, I go, well, that's nice. But it didn't impact me for yet another 5 years. So I guess I'm really slow. 5 years later, actually, it was almost 10 years later that I decided I better open that book. And then I began a process of 2 years of translation of that book. And so then that, again, was my second. So I had those two pathways just through personal crises and then through Buddhist education. And then in years after that, in 2000, I'm really bad with math. It's 10 years ago, I founded Janasuka, just with the nonprofit organization, just with the focus of the female Buddhas and the teachings of the female masters. And that's a little bit unique in the Tibetan Buddhist world, to have an entire organization just dedicated to that theme. So, and now I'm moving onward, and today is a big step forward for me personally to be talking about the sacred feminine in this dialogue with incredible people. So I'm very excited. I'm making progress.
Well, as I was feeling, what was my first connection? I would have to say it was an experience that I had when I was 7 years old. And I had an unusual upbringing in that my parents took us around the world every year. We grew up in Southeast Asia. And on this particular trip, I was 7, we were in India. And India is so fabulous because it's such the smorgasbord of any kind of reflection of the divine that you can find is there. And I remember just loving it, loving the color, loving the people, loving the reflections of spirit. And I was walking with my family down a road, and this little girl who was about the same age as me, Indian, barefoot, in really ragged clothes, was walking towards me. And it was the first time in my life that I had total connection and opening to a being. And as she and I came together, like every cell in my body blasted open. And she did the same thing. So here these two little 7-year-old girls madly in love with each other from this distance and walking, and I still get chills, walking towards each other and just beaming and just like, I found you. And then we passed. And I was a different being because I suddenly knew pure love of another girl, of that complete place of opening. And it's, in a way, my life's been a quest to get back to that. And when I left Asia to come to college, coming to the States was a really big shock. And what I felt was disconnected, and that everyone around me was disconnected. And I didn't know how, I couldn't even name it. I didn't have language for it. It wasn't until I went back to Asia and went, right, people here are connected in some way to spirit and to each other. There's a deep, deep sense of community in Asia. There was when I lived there. There still is. And I was missing that, but I didn't know how to create that. So I went into politics thinking that was the way. And I was good. For 2 years, I fought every fight there was to fight, and thoroughly. And around a couple of years in, I'd gone to Nicaragua with a group of people, and we had brought toys down there, and stayed up at night thinking about how is it that these people are being killed by, being supported by my country. It was just a crazy time. And I came back and I got the message, because I was like, I'm going back to Central America. I'm out of here. I don't like these people. I'm out of here. And this voice came and said, you're here, very sweet feminine voice. You're here to be here with your people. You're here to serve your people. And I went, yeah, my people aren't here. This very sweet feminine voice said, you're to stay here and to serve your people. And I fought that. And that summer, my best friend Autumn and I walked to the campus. I was at UC Davis. We went to the campus. We checked out every book we could find on female spirituality and earth-based religions. And we walked home literally with stacks of books from the library and spent the next 3 weeks in our room reading everything we could find around the feminine and spirituality. And it was profound. It was, again, a coming home of, oh, this is what I've been searching for, is that sense of connection. And I feel like I was drafted by the goddess, is how I say it now. Because she and I were like, hey, let's go share what we learned. Would this be fun? And we tried to get a teacher that we both really respected to come, and she was busy. And so we were like, we'll do it. We'll just share what we learned. And the first time we shared what we learned, 60 women showed up. Wow. And we both were like, I think I was 25. And we looked at each other, and she goes, I'll take 30 if you take 30. And it's just been that joy of sharing that has been my path. And there's been a lot of different teachers that have come in. I've studied with Vicki Noble, with Cara Dwight and Falling Star, and then with Don Miguel Ruiz. So I'll talk a little bit about the Toltec. But my perspective today is a combination of European shamanism, where I started my path, and some Buddhism, just because I'm so seeped in it from being raised in Asia, as well as Toltec.
How is the sacred feminine expressed or portrayed or communicated in your tradition or spiritual pathway? And what is the role of the sacred feminine in your tradition or spiritual pathway?
Should we go backwards now?
Yeah, let's go back. You're warmed up, HeatherAsh.
Well, I'm sharing from two different traditions. So the first tradition that I studied in European shamanism is very, very female-based. And also it's really about balance. And so there's a lot of love of the feminine, and earth being feminine, and sky being more the masculine energy. And that in the cycles that the two come together and come apart. And that there's reverence for both, that it's not separate at all. And that's really a big foundation. When I was initiated into the lineage that I'm part of in the tradition, one of the huge parts of this ritual we did is there were two people that came dressed as the goddess and the god. Mm-hmm. And they stood there, and they started talking to me and basically saying, pick which one of us is your path. And I stood there like, and as I closed my eyes and really felt, I'm like, okay, what's the choice? What's the choice? And opened, what I realized is there's no choice. And at that moment, I grabbed both of their hands and said, I take you both. So for me, in that tradition, there isn't a separation of like women, feminine better, masculine better, and I know it's the same in all of our traditions. And I just like putting that out because sometimes it's easy to be in backlash because there's so much reflection of male, and so when women finally are like, yay! So very important around that place of being held by the mother, that place of being able to really rest into the mother in the European shamanic, and rest into the earth and be held and have that reflection of beauty, we can say, and also of all the different aspects. And that's something else that I love around the divine feminine, is that in the European tradition, there's lots of different aspects of the divine feminine, and there tends to be one aspect of the masculine. Like the masculine is really steady, and the divine feminine shifts, has many faces, like the moon, so that the masculine is more the sun and the steady, and the feminine tends to be more the change, so from fierce to incredibly gentle. And that reflection is so important for all of us, male and female, around really embodying all the aspects of ourselves, all the different parts of ourself. And the whole line from, I love the feminine, if you have the mother nurturing the baby and the mother defending from the bear, or the mother defending from child, from that whole range of energy that we tap into. And it's interesting because in the Toltec tradition with the feminine, well, first I'll say really quickly, I love this story. This is so fun. One day I was talking to my sister, who's a great embodiment of the divine feminine, and she said, "What's with your name, Toltec Center of Creative Intent? It's way too long. You got to shorten it." And I went, okay, the divine feminine is speaking through my sister, because it was just like the sword coming through, and I'm like, I hear ya. And so I started just dreaming, and this word kept coming up to me, Toci, and I'm going, hello, Toci does not match Toltec Center of Creative Intent. And it kept coming back, Toci. Hello doesn't fit. Toci. I'm like, all right, I'll go Google it. So, you don't know, right? You don't Google it. So I go sit down and I Google Toci, thinking that I'm going to find some organization that's already named Toci, blah, blah, blah. So I type in Toci, and what shows up from Wikipedia is Toci, a pre-Aztec goddess of purification and ceremony. And okay, got it. And I really feel that in the tradition of the Toltec right now. There's a lot of importance of the women coming back, and in the tradition for the Nagual women. And the Nagual woman in the tradition is the one that has the vision and puts forth where the community is going. And it's the Nagual man that goes, I'll make it happen. So the feminine actually sets the direction, feels into the community, sets the direction. The masculine goes, great, we'll put that forth. So I love, and this is so true about the feminine so often, that I thought I was the one creating something. And in fact, Toci's been creating it all along, and just decided to reveal herself.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. Well, I am coming from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and so I think that if I need to answer this question about how is the principle of the sacred feminine articulated for us, and what is the role of the sacred feminine in a practitioner's spiritual path to enlightenment, I would differentiate, first of all, two types of Tibetan Buddhism, exoteric Buddhism and esoteric Buddhism. So in the exoteric tradition, which is the same as Buddhism that we had in India, we do have, the very central is the principle of the Great Mother, which is called Prajnaparamita, or Yung Chenmo. So the Great Mother is it is herself the wisdom that transcends duality, the wisdom that is the wisdom of enlightenment. And she holds the space for the realization of that wisdom, and she is that wisdom herself. So both the space for realization or enlightenment and the essence, wisdom essence of enlightenment herself. And that's the tradition of the Great Mother. So she is the womb of all experience, whether it be the experience of unenlightened existence or the experience of enlightenment. The Great Mother is the source of all experience. And because her nature, she's the personification of the wisdom of emptiness. So she is the wisdom of emptiness herself, and she is the space in which that wisdom can be developed by a practitioner. So this is in the exoteric tradition. In the esoteric tradition, the female principle is translated into a paradigm that we call the Dakini. The Dakini is a Sanskrit word. The etymology in Tibetan is khandro. And in khandro it means the state of mind that can function well, effectively, under any condition. So again, this idea of change, it basically, whatever happens in the space of reality, the realized mind functions very well. And so that is the principle of the Dakini. So at the level of the Dakini, then we have visible and invisible Dakinis. At the invisible level, it's very similar to the Great Mother tradition, where the invisible or the ultimate Dakini is the space of transcendence and the experience of transcendence itself, the wisdom. And then then the second level would be the energetic level. So then from that ultimate space, which is invisible, then that energy projects itself into forms, female forms that are these Dakinis. At the energetic level, they direct just about everything for the spiritual practitioner. So the closest ally for a meditator is the Dakini. The Dakini is really your personal guide to enlightenment, as opposed to something generic or what a teacher would say in the book. The Dakini is playing with your energy field in order to stimulate or evoke your realization. So she's absolutely essential to experientially to a meditator's or a yogin's life. The Dakini is kind of the consort of your meditation in a way. And then we have the Dakinis are also at a third level, human beings, women who are embodiments of the ultimate Dakini, the energy Dakinis. And these human Dakinis are the embodiment, exemplary, like example of the union of enlightened wisdom together with compassion for sentient beings. So they are in the world to sort of demonstrate. Some of them can be born that way, like spontaneously. Some of them can reach that level of status through their own personal practice. So again, we have different types of human Dakinis. And then when I'm hearing you talk about the earth and stuff, then just in general, the 5 elements that make up the cosmos, these are all considered to be the Dakinis. So we have the Dakini of earth, of water, of fire, and wind. So we also share that. The world is basically feminine, sourced in the feminine. And as far as the balance between the feminine and the masculine, the general principle is that the feminine represents or is the wisdom of enlightenment itself, whereas the masculine is the means or the method for achieving that wisdom. So similar a little bit. And of course, like you said, definitely they are not separate. So we have, like in deities, we'll all say, the left hand represents the female deity of wisdom, the right hand is the masculine deity of method and skillful means. So these two are interlaced and inseparable. So, and it has also nothing to do with the gender of your physical body in Tibetan Buddhism at all. Both men and women equally share and need to participate and connect to the masculine and feminine principles in order to attain enlightenment.
A hard ash to follow. Like Charlie Brown says, a ducky and look at the clouds. Well, so many similarities, and this is just wonderful to really sense how we're not really different. We're really all on the same path here. In my tradition, in my practice, I would say that I'm going to speak more on the embodied level than on the esoteric kind of airy level, but more on the earth level, although both happen in nature-based spirituality. To me, the feminine shows up in several ways in our practice of the, I would say that the major spiritual practices of nature-based spirituality for me are medicine walks, which would be like a walking meditation following the map of the medicine wheel. So the Native American medicine wheel is very simple and very complex at the same time. It's interesting because we look at some of them are the four directions, the east, south, west, and north. Some, in our tradition, we have 8 directions, so we add the earth, the sky, all of our relations, and the ancestors. So it creates a double map. And the feminine, some of the directions are more embodied of the feminine, but actually the feminine shows up in every direction, as does the masculine, which is very much like what you're saying. It's not separate. It's just, these are principles, and they are for everybody, for male and female. So in the East, we look at enlightenment, new beginnings, the spring of the year, new birth. In the South is more dedicated to the feminine. It has to do with love, with sexuality, sensuality, creativity, reflection, the moon, the energy of the moon. But, men go there too. It's not, it's really not a divisive kind of thing. The West is about the darkness, about death, little death, letting go, introspection, going within, many other aspects. I'm just really simplifying this. Each direction generally has a totem animal, which is really cool because we all get those totem animals. I mean, whether you know it or not, if something shows up for you over and over, it's probably trying to speak to you. And that's a lovely part of it. In the North, we talk about the masculine principle, but it is those things that got us here today. It's getting in the car and doing something. It's putting your stake in the ground. It's being clear about what you think and feel. It's having a spiritual practice. We see that in the North, and maybe we think of that as a masculine attribute, to be disciplined and practiced, but it's also a part of the feminine. I mean, if you're going to give birth to a baby, you better be pretty focused on what you're doing. So I just love that about, and I think of the nature-based spirituality as being less focused on the transcendent, of leaving the earth and leaving the material world, more focused on actually embodiment and actually being in your body, being on the earth, enjoying being in a body, being grateful for having a body. And so it's more about the eminence of spirit than the transcendence. And this is just my sense of it. I also think about the symbolism of the circle. And to me, femininity has to do with the circle. It has to do with connection, relationships, creating community. It's not linear. It's more circular, spiral, and in the EarthTribe, almost everything we do is in a circle. I mean, we meet in a circle. The lodge is a circle. We circle around the fire when we have the fire ceremony. So it has that sense of the deep feminine just in how it's set up, for me in particular. In Native American history, many of particularly in the Northeast, the tribal lineage was matrilinear. So you married into your wife's tribe. So there was a certain amount of, the man took on the woman's tribal name or her clan name. It's very common in the Eastern tribes. In the Iroquois Nation, which was actually part of the Constitution of the United States, was based on the Iroquois law, I guess you would say, how they set their map of behavior and legalism. legalism up, the women in the Iroquois chose the men who were the leaders. And the women also were the ones that decided whether or not they would go to war. And they didn't often go to war. Because women were in that position. It was very rare that they went to war because they said, no, we're not going to do that. So that's definitely, to me, a pretty intense manifestation of the divine feminine, that the women were for life and for peace and for holding the circle together. So thank you.
Thank you. So moving more into a dialogue between the three of you, what are the many guises and purposes of the sacred feminine in the spiritual pathway?
Can you repeat that?
What are the many? You wrote it. What are the many guises and purposes of the sacred feminine in the spiritual pathway?
Thank you.
No answers, we can follow you.
I don't know what I was thinking of. I must have been having a masculine moment. Well, in Buddhism, when you're talking, mostly we're talking at the first level, basic level, we're really talking about meditation. So as far as the transference of these principles of the enlightened feminine in Buddhism, in terms of culture or country, or real manifestation in the ordinary world, there's a big gap there. So in the spiritual world, in the world of meditation, in the yogic world, it's one story. And in the reality of the Asian cultures, it's another one. So the only place I can speak is from the point of view of someone who has decided that they want to attain enlightenment. And they set out on the path of meditation in order to attain enlightenment. So it's kind of at that level. So the feminine principle then, I think we could talk about it again in terms of the Dakini principle for the practitioners of esoteric Buddhism, which is the major part of Buddhism in Tibet, although it did have definitely the full transmission of exoteric Buddhism. But if you're a tantric practitioner, let's say that, we can use that word, esoteric tantric meditator, then the tantras say, the scriptures say, although there is no difference between the potential for a man or a woman to attain enlightenment based on their physical gender, because the nature of their mind is the same. The nature of mind, the nature of the wisdom to be realized is the same, whether your body is male or female. But we have another level of embodiment in the tantric tradition, which is the subtle energy body. And that you're familiar with the subtle energy body of light and chakras and prana. So actually the quality of your mind is in relationship to the quality of your prana and the healthiness, I guess, of the subtle body. So in this sense then, and the Dakini is actually herself your subtle body. So because of that, then practitioners have inwardly different capacities. And generally speaking, it says in the Tantra that a woman's physical body, gender, is associated with a subtle body that is more supple and conducive to the experience of meditation in realization. So there's a little bit of a contradiction. In the sense there is no difference between men and women's potentials, but if you're a woman, then your subtle body is likely to be a little bit more amenable to the spiritual process. So there's one kind of a little admission of superiority. Yeah. Okay, so there is that. Then because the feminine is herself itself, the wisdom to be real, that is to be realized, which we cannot put into words, that wisdom, the wisdom that is beyond expression or description, or the wisdom that is beyond the conceptual mind, then actually, if you're going, we meditate with masculine Buddhas and female Buddhas, then since the female Buddhas or Dakinis represent the wisdom that is to be attained, if you meditate directly on the female Buddhas or Dakinis, it's a quicker path to enlightenment than meditating on the masculine aspect. So there's another little admission of tantric superiority. So for those two reasons, and that's kind of the role of the feminine in the path of meditation. And then as far as the guises or the I don't know what
guises and purposes.
So that's for purpose, okay, maybe a little bit for purpose. And well, as far as the guises, I mean, there's even culturally in the societies, in the Himalayan societies that practice Tibetan Buddhism or Vajrayana, there's outwardly a great veneration of the female gender, as even taught. You should always circumambulate, which is a way of showing reverence. Women, and of course they don't do this, but it says in the scriptures, there is admonition or recommendation, to keep for men to keep their vision pure, that they should pay homage and reverence and circumambulate women, just ordinary women, even not even necessarily realized women. So therefore, the point is that any woman could be a real Dakini. So you better circumambulate whenever you see a woman. Because you never know. It's not obvious. There is no badge. So there's no badge. This is a Dakini who make prostrations and circumambulate. All women, in a sense, are the equal embodiment of the wisdom of enlightenment. Even if they haven't themselves personally realized that, there's still this attribution to them. So there is that way of any woman and every woman is the representation or the embodiment of the sacred feminine. And that's definitely an idealized level. Reality is not like that, but I think it's still worth mentioning. And then in the daily life of a yogic practitioner, then the whole environment is the Dakini. So everything that happens in your life, whether it's a sunny day or a windy day, or whatever is happening mentally, the storms in the mind, all of this is thought to be the movement of the energy of the Dakini in the space of your mind as the opportunity to gain realization. So you can't gain realization in the tantric tradition by remaining immobile in a vacuum box, meditating like you see the Sutra Buddha, like without movement. The idea of meditation realization in the tantric school is very fluid. It has to do with movement, and the Dakinis are called the dancers of interdependent phenomena, everything that comes together in a certain way that then become the basis for realization. So the Dakinis are kind of responsible for setting up the stage for the quality of your meditation and your realization. And so in that way, they can show up in any kind of guise whatsoever, in masculine bodies, in experiences. There's a whole range of it.
Here we go. Back to the earth. Well, that is such a good question, and I think because at the foundation of what I would call earth-based spirituality is really kind of a panentheistic belief system where all of creation is animated by the Great Spirit. So there's not a separation between the human species and the rest of the species on the earth, that we're all connected at this level of the spirit is in everything. And because the earth is the creation in this way of thinking, the Mother Earth, I mean, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the earth, if it weren't for Gaia, the goddess Gaia, that feeds us and holds us and keeps us, that I could say that almost everything in existence is the feminine in its guise, and is the purpose. And I think one of the things that we might talk about later about contemporary times is that we've lost that so much in our culture and on the planet that we're destroying her. I don't think there's any doubt that we've done incredible damage and ravaged Mother Earth, and so the need for the divine feminine principle to emerge in a more powerful way is really important to me, because I think with progress, with the progressiveness of what's happened to the Earth and the overpopulation of the Earth and the fact that our natural resources are declining and we're polluting the air, all of these things that we all know. I'm not giving a sermon about that, but I think fundamental to nature-based spirituality is this realization and consciousness that we need more of the divine feminine at every scale of civilization to return to a more conscious and ecological relationship with our actual home. This is our home, and we're fouling our own home. Why we do that, I don't know. I mean, it just has to do with human consciousness, I guess, or lack thereof. So I would broaden my sense of where the feminine is in nature-based spirituality out to the planet, really, and just say that there are spirits in the field that we might say is more of a masculine spirit, but actually, creation and life is really, to me, the feminine. So that's where I would go with that. Thank you.
So a story comes to mind from Central America, and in the Toltec, I'm just going to focus on the Toltec right now. In the Toltec tradition, the feminine aspect of spirituality can come through anyone at any time, and there's been many times when we've been doing ceremony and ritual that energy of the divine feminine will come through someone, either female or male, and that energetic can speak through and speak to us, that we become vessels to allow the energy of spirit of the divine mother to come through and to share. And one of the favorite representations of the divine mother in Central America is the Virgin of Guadalupe, and is incredibly revered in Mexico and all over the world now. And what I love about her story is that it's the story of the divine feminine coming through to save her people, to save all of her people, to bring them back together again. So at the time that the Virgin of Guadalupe appeared to Juan Diego, so he was a peasant, and he was walking through what is now Mexico City, but at the time was all hills, and had a vision of this woman appear to him, and she said, "Build a temple to me here." And he said, "I can't build you a temple, the bishop ain't going to allow that." And she's basically said, "Build a temple." So he ignored her. She disappeared. He went, "Whoa, that was weird." And ignored her. And she appeared to him 2 more times. And one time, there's this great story where he's rushing, he's trying to avoid her because she's pestering him. She keeps coming to him. He's like, "I don't want to talk to you." And he finally tells her, "My uncle's sick, I have to go take care of my uncle." And she says, "I'll handle your uncle." And she goes and heals his uncle, because he was taking medicines for his uncle. Goes and heals his uncle, and then comes back to him a 3rd time and says, basically, "Look, go to the bishop and tell the bishop I want a temple here." And he again says, I'll go, but they're not going to believe me. And she said, "They'll believe you." And she gave him roses that he wrapped up in his tilma. And when he went to the bishop, and you can imagine this man, here's this peasant, walking to the bishop to tell the bishop the goddess wants a temple. He's not feeling real great about the message he's carrying in the times. So I can just imagine this really humble man just like, oh. So he gets there, and he just opens, and they start pushing him away, and he opens his tilma, and all the roses fall out. And impressioned on his tilma is a vision of the Virgin of Guadalupe.
Oh my God.
And the pictures of it is like, it's so great because they show kind of the in the paintings, they show like the just before and the just after, and the just before everyone's like, and he's starting to open, and the just after is like there's angels singing, and the bishop's going. There's an incredible statue at the basilica where the tilma is. The tilma is up on the wall, and people, they have 3 walkways, moving walkways, and people will go by just crying, holding their babies up, kissing the tilma as they go by, and being blessed by that Divine Mother energy. And what for me was so profound about this story is that there's a huge sculpture of Juan Diego opening and the bishop celebrating, but then there's all these Aztecs down, all these Aztecs, and they're all bringing offerings to the Virgin. Because what happened is, at the time, this is when the Spanish were starting to kill a lot of the native people. The native people were fighting for their land. And at the time that she appeared, the Aztecs looked up and went, "Oh, hey, we know her. She's such and such goddess." I can never remember their names because they're very long. But she's one. They're like, "We got it. We know who she is. Great, we'll worship her." And so basically they laid down their arms and stopped getting murdered, and were able to then survive because they saw their goddess that was so familiar. And so that's something that I see in many parts of the world that the Divine Feminine tends to do, is if her people are in trouble, she'll show up in whatever way she needs to show up and however she's received, so that message comes through of come back into peace, come back into harmony with each other. And in the lineage, in Don Miguel Ruiz's lineage, his mama, Mother Sarita, very, very, very Catholic, and very, very, very Toltec. And that's one of the things about the Toltec, is that the Toltec are artists, and so we use whatever works to create our life and to create beauty, to create harmony. And so Sarita, so there's a lot of that reverence for Christ, reverence for Guadalupe, reverence for the Virgin Mother that's in our lineage because of the mama of our lineage, Sarita, who was fabulous. She would get up and she's this little 100-year-old woman, and she would take flowers and start blessing people and throwing water and speaking and doing these huge prayers. And it's beautiful to see the feminine come through different beings and recognize that it's not one force. It's not one manifestation. It's many manifestations where it's needed. I think that's very true in all traditions. It's like the call comes and the feminine principle shows up to whatever the call is.
So that's a good segue into the storytelling part of our time together. Hi. I'm Bill Tagle. The tribal name is Starheart. And I'm a little nervous being the token male.
They confiscated our daggers on the way in.
So I was born a poor half-breed on the Llano Estacado, halfway between the Taos Pueblo and the Comanche Reservation, and in the middle of Mother Earth's spirituality. So this is an important moment for me to be here with you in this setting. And the heart of Mother Earth's spirituality is what I call cosmic storytelling. That's the heartbeat of Mother Earth's spirituality. So we'd like to hear from you now a heroic story of the sacred feminine.
one way to translate that Sanskrit word dakini is spiritual heroine or hero. So we do have, of course, for us to be a hero means to conquer the obscurations of the mind that veil your Buddha essence, your true enlightened nature. So when we talk about overcoming problems or something, that's the basic thing, how to overcome the negativity, the ignorance, and the lack of awareness within the mind. In that context, so we have stories in that context. As far as what I think you're looking for, which is more manifest, ordinary reality level, if you take the Buddha, you take Yeshe Tsogyal, who lived in 8th century Tibet. So she was the consort, the partner of the great Indian master, Guru Padmasambhava, who brought Buddhism from India to Tibet, basically established Buddhism in Tibet. He absolutely, it's said, the legend is that he searched for 7 eons of times in the realms of non-material realms for the perfect female consort, because we have this, because the feminine and masculine must be in union in our paradigm for anything to happen. Nothing happens just one-sidedly. So, and then the person, the goddess that he chose was descended into the human realms and was reborn as Yeshe Tsogyal in 8th century Tibet. So then she herself was in essence already enlightened, but she demonstrated the path to enlightenment for her disciples through her life example. And so she spent she lived for 211 years, as legend would have it. And most of that time she spent receiving teachings from Padmasambhava, doing meditation retreats. And in the end, she became a master in her own right, equal to Padmasambhava, and became the founder, co-founder with him of what we call the tradition of revelation, or Dharma. So if it weren't for, her role there, we would not have maybe the whole transmission of the Buddhist teachings through revelation. We would just have the transmission of the Buddhist teachings we call the canonical transmission that came from India. That's more material. So she spent most of her life as a yogini, as a meditator, but actually at the same time she played a very important political role. At that time when the introduction of Buddhism into Tibet was not an easy thing. The people who were there totally resented it. There was already an established indigenous practice called Bön. And so there was great upheaval. And the Tibetans are very warlike, actually, especially in those days. And so even though her life was very much dedicated to meditation and spiritual pursuit, actually she would come out periodically to run to the capital city or parliament, which was a place called Samye. And there she would direct people and the ministers and solve problems and disputes. And she would often do it with her magical powers. So once upon a time then, I think in 858, there was what's called the Great Debate. In those days, in the scholarly tradition, different people would debate each other, and if you lost the debate, you would have to convert. So if you were the Republican or the Democratic, you lost, you'd have to become Democratic. And that's how they would do it. And these debates would go on for years. One debate could last 3, 4, 5 years. And they had this tradition in India at Nalanda and Kamalashila and places like that. And they brought that to Tibet, to the center where Buddhism disseminated throughout Tibet from this center called Samye. And so they had one of these great debates between the Tibetan Guru Rinpoche's interpretation of the Buddhist doctrine and the Chinese interpretation of the Buddhist doctrine. I don't know how many, I can't remember how many years it lasted, but several, 3, 4, or 5. And finally, it wasn't looking good for the Tibetan side. And so Yeshe Tsogyal came in there single-handedly. They finally said, we just really need your help. And so she won that debate. She just So this is an example. I mean, it's a big deal. It's not just a debate, because the whole country was at stake. If they lost this debate, that would be the end of Indian Buddhism in Tibet. So she won that debate, and even the appearance, the very first appearance of Padmasambhava before he was born in India, according to the legend, he was invoked into this world through a female dakini. Again, they were having another debate at Nalanda, and they were losing, and they came, all the men, what are we going to do? They were up on the rooftop saying, what should we do? So a dakini, a female dakini, appeared and said, I have a brother, and if you invoke him with incense and supplication from the top of the roof, he will come. And that her brother was Guru Padmasambhava. So the introduction of Guru Padmasambhava into this universe came through the agency. So without that, I mean, there would be no establishment of that doctrine in the world. Then contemporary, moving more contemporary, recently I've been researching the lives of some contemporary female masters in Tibet, and as I mentioned before, some of the dakinis are human dakinis, And so there's this one particular one, her name is Toci Lama, and she was born 1938 to 2002, so she's very contemporary. And during the Cultural Revolution in China, she lived in the eastern part of Tibet, which is now totally part of China. There was a great famine during the Cultural Revolution in Tibet, and she was the light at the end of the tunnel for her people, totally manifested in this way. For the famine, she was able to cook a small amount of rice, and whether you ate just one small amount of rice, you felt completely satiated, or she was able to multiply, like the loaves and the fishes story, and feed her people and protect people from imprisonment. And so she really everybody looked towards Toci Lama to get them through this really dark period of starvation, of imprisonment, the total devastation of the Buddhist doctrine through the Cultural Revolution. So, she is a contemporary example. And then on a smaller level, contemporarily, there's the nuns in Tibet are actually, not all of them, but there are a lot of the monastics that have actually protested, like especially in 2008. There was a large number of nuns. So that's another kind of role or archetype for some of the nuns, is kind of revolutionary at the same time that they're totally monastic and spiritual. So there are examples in the history of Tibetan Buddhism where women do show up and do play very important roles in how things unfold in society and pushing for change. So that we do have stories like that. Yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you. So I'll go. I think I'm going to use my notes for this one because I don't want to leave anything out. This is a myth from the Lakota people, and it's a very important.
Is it white buffalo?
Yes,
oh,
white
great.
buffalo calf. Some of you may have heard this, but it's really, what I like about it is that the woman in this story is really very not your nurturing mother who is coming to help you, in a soft, compassionate way. She's really a kind of a fierce being. So just pretend like you're getting a little bedtime story. Two Lakota hunters were out looking for game, and they were so close they were almost like brothers. They really liked each other a lot. And while they were out hunting, they looked on the horizon and they saw this mysterious vision of a woman, and as she approached, they could see that she had this bundle on her back. And actually, one of the men said, boy, she is a really gorgeous woman. She's really hot. And so he developed this desire for her, this sexual desire for her. And his friend was calmer and said, no, that's not a good idea. That's inappropriate at this time. And as she approached, she set down her bundle, and she sensed this conflict between these two men. So she invited the bad boy into her circle. And as she did this, this great cloud of smoke appeared around them. And as the smoke cleared, she was standing by herself, and at her feet was a skeleton with a snake entwined in it that was devouring the guy who wasn't so upstanding, the bad guy. And she said to the other hunter, she said, "Now I want you to see what you've seen. Behold this, and you need to tell your chief that I have a very important message for him." So he returned to the tribal council, and he told his story, and he was deemed to be a good person, and his companion was deemed to be a bad person. Later, the woman showed up at the council with her bundle, and what she revealed to them was the sacred pipe. And the sacred pipe is the sacrament for many Native Americans. And what's lovely and beautiful about the sacred pipe is that not only is it the sacrament, it's also the manifestation of the male and female. So the bowl of the pipe is made from catlinite, which is a very particular, very hard red stone that comes from up in the Dakotas. Just really one resource for that. And then the stem of the pipe is made from wood. So bowl is the female, the stem is the masculine, and joined together you have both of those energies joined together. And it's for prayer. So the mythology and the reality is that when you smoke the pipe, you don't inhale it. You use a kind of tobacco that's pure. And in the sweat lodge, for example, where you're all sitting in a circle in the dark praying, the smoke from the pipe is carrying those prayers up in smoke and taking it into another realm where those prayers can be transformed in some way and then come back in a transformational way or just left there. And so she brought the pipe and she said that this is the way to send your voice to the Great Spirit. Wankantanka is the name of the Great Spirit. So after she had that council, after she was in the council, she walked around in the sunwise direction around the lodge and walked away from the people. And then she went a short distance, and there was again this cloud of smoke. And when the smoke cleared, she was a buffalo calf, colored brown and yellow. And then she walked a little further away, and another great cloud of smoke. When that smoke cleared, she became a white buffalo. And I'll just pause there for a moment because the white buffalo, you may read sometimes about a white buffalo calf being born, and some of them have actually been murdered for some strange reason. Can't figure that out. But it's a sign. It's seen as a sign of a shift and a change. And there's a lot of white animals now that are showing up, white ravens and white bears, and they're not albinos, they're a genetic white animal. So she became a white buffalo, and then she walked off a little further and smoke, and then when the smoke cleared, there was a black buffalo, and the black buffalo bowed in all of the directions to the four quarters and then disappeared over the hill. So you can imagine that she's representing the four races on the earth: the yellow, the brown, the black, the white, and also for the Lakota, the buffalo was a sacred animal because it gave them everything they needed. It gave them shelter, it gave them tools, it gave them food, it gave them weapons, everything. And when the white man came and destroyed all the herds of buffalo, that was it for the Native Americans in what I would call the American Holocaust. So that's my story of the heroic feminine, is that she was the emissary from the spirit, bringing this sacrament to the people and bringing the sacred pipe. And she was a powerful warrior type of feminine icon. So thank you.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
This is reminding me, some of the things are coming to mind. We do have many stories, too, of the Dakinis changing form, emanating, like you said, in the form of animals and things like this. So they do shape shift, the Dakinis in our mythology. And also a classic, I forgot this, but one of the classic roles for the Dakini is for the meditator. And there are many very, meditator thinks it's always a he. He's doing well, but actually his meditation is still either ego-based or falsely intellectual. And in these stories, the meditator thinks I'm almost realized this is some spiritual ego on top of ordinary ego. And then the Dakini, it's always a female Dakini who appears in a vision and like beats the shit out of him, really. Often the time, in this role, she'll often appear as an old hag and just say, you think you're hot shit, but you're nothing. And just totally cut him down. And then after in the stories, then they regroup. And then they really get the true meaning of meditation. So the Dakini then does serve that purpose of cutting through the most subtle levels of ego clinging, conceptuality, misunderstanding. And then I know another story that told in China, in Wutaishan, the 5-peak mountain of Manjushri, not too far from Beijing. Then great master Kenshin Jimmy Punsok went there and pilgrimage, and the Dakinis appeared. He was greeted by the Dakinis in the form of cuckoo birds, and they gave him teachings. And everybody, there was like 10,000 people that went with him to Wutaishan. It was a great thing, and everybody saw. Apparently I wasn't there, but the story is that everybody saw. And then one time, also in Wutaishan, Dakini appeared in the form as a peacock. And then expounded the Dharma and then disappeared. So we have those kinds of stories too.
Yeah. I'll just say briefly, because I shared my one heroine story. But in the Toltec tradition, one of the main reflections is what we call the angel of death. And the angel of death is seen as female, that she's a feminine aspect of the divine, and that everything that we have materially belongs to her, and that our life is on loan. And so there's a whole rewrite of the way that we are in the world. So often as Westerners, we see ourselves as entitled to be here and gifted, and we're here to serve and to help. And it's beautiful, the flip that happens from the Toltec perspective of your life is a gift from spirit. And at any time, the angel of death can come and reclaim everything. And with that dance, with that relationship, that new way of being in relationship with the world, we really learn how to see the preciousness of everything and not take things for granted. And to know that death isn't something that is against us, coming to get, it's like the boogeyman that's coming to get us. It's this incredible, compassionate being, fierce, compassionate being that stands right next to us and reminds us constantly, this is temporary. This manifestation, everything that you are experiencing is temporary and belongs to me and is on loan. And so there's just this beautiful coming into presence with the gift that life is and that everything is from that relationship, from that really, really important relationship with the Divine Feminine as the angel of death.
Thank you. So I'm going to collapse the next two pieces because we're running a little close on time, and relating the divine or sacred feminine to the contemporary scene. And sometimes we use the phrase real time versus what false time. But really, I think the manifest world is actually not as real as the world, the time you're talking. But shifting, I was particularly fascinated, Yeshe, by your story about the debates and how the loser of the debate converted to the winner of the debates. And I was thinking about the past election. I don't think that's going to happen. So one of the questions that you brought up from our delightful planning session the other night was one issue is how does the divine feminine speak to both men and women, and I would also add to relationships. How does that figure in? Also, any other domains that you want to zero in here and speak to?
I'm good. I do want to speak to this. This comes up a lot on a legendary level, a mythological level, which is not necessarily, like you said, more unreal than this. It's of course, in Tibetan Buddhism, the feminine principle is exalted, is pinnacle in all of its manifestations and levels. Nobody questions that. In real time, we all know, and it's been quite widely discussed, and why is there this lack of coherence between the spiritual doctrine and the reality of daily life? And so that's what I think I would like to sort of, that needs to be addressed in all fairness. I'm not painting an idyllic picture. I think that being a woman in Tibet was not a walk in the park at all, ever, except for maybe a few. So that is the reality. So even though the woman is the goddess, if we like that word, the Dakini, the sacred feminine, she's essential to enlightenment. Even if you're Tari Lama, great master, it's not a walk in the park because you are living in this culture, that masculine-based culture, and the erasure of the sacred feminine. In the annals of Tibetan history, we still have, I mean, how does that happen? It's my question. Because in legend, even Yeshe Tsogyal, we do have such great, her biography and how important she was. And there are other female teachers, but actually the ones that we know, it's almost not much more than a mere handful through history. And so I know that for sure there were hundreds of realized female masters in Tibet. And I've always wondered, where are their stories? You can't find any written material about them. So being perplexed about this, I finally concluded that their stories are contained in the oral tradition. And you can get some of these stories from contemporary Tibetans who will talk about their mother or their grandmother or their sister, and she was a great Dakini, and she was at this, and without her I'd be nothing. And so you can get a sense that they played a very important role. They were recognized in a way, but not recognized in the way that the masculine heroes and spiritual masters are recognized with volumes of spiritual biographies. So they're lost in history, in written history, but I believe that they're there in the oral history still. We can track some of them. Recently, I'm watching the life story of this Tari Lama, and she, I think it was 40 years old when she met with her destined consort. And after that, it was very beautiful. For the next 20 years or so, they co-taught and they traveled together and they sat on the throne together, and so they revealed treasures together. But I found her biography, and it starts from the time of, as all Tibetan biographies start, with prophecy. Before it's going to be prophesied this person is born, and there's a lot of that. And then her birth, and then her education, and then in the Cultural Revolution, she was a young woman in her 20s when all of this happened. And then she meets her Namcho Rinpoche, her consort that I just mentioned, and her biography stops. And then if you want to know anything more about her, you have to read Namcho, his biography. And then, so I went to his biography, so I'm reading, and this isn't Tibetan, so it's not that fast. But, after that, it becomes Namcho Rinpoche and his consort. And she's gone. I mean, she's just mentioned as, And it's like I'm going, there it is, right there. Disappear from history. It gives me like, I can't even tell you how chicken skin that feels. So I think, so I'm witnessing that happen just through my own research and studies. So I imagine that that's what happened in history, that somehow the women, the heroic women who were so important, due to the culture, they just disappear. You know, there is an erasure in the historical records and stuff like that. And what else are we talking?
Really hear from
Yeah.
all of you about how you relate your perspective to the current scene.
Well, for me, one thing that has really come up is one of our students at Wisdom University is a really fine woman writing a dissertation about sexuality and sex education for kids, and really has it more focused on the parents, how parents can talk in normal talk to children as young as 2 or 3 or 4 years old about their bodies, about sexuality. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. And as a part of that, she recommended to me a DVD called Misrepresentation. I don't know if anyone in this room knows about this, but I would suggest that you watch it. It's a little bit long. But so the piece for me is, how is the divine feminine personified in the media for young women, say 8 years old to 30 or whatever. And it's really pretty horrendous, the misogynistic kinds of things that young girls go through in terms of their personal image, their body image, what's expected of them in terms of being perfect, the fact that every contemporary magazine, whether it's a fashion magazine or People magazine, wherever there's a picture of a woman, it's all been totally photoshopped, so they're 20 pounds thinner than they are in actual life. The makeup is incredible, and the video games with women personified in these really ultra-sexual ways with very few clothes on, being killed. I mean, you know, a lot of the video games, you want to kill those women. So on and on and on. I mean, I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but it is something that is really, I think, troubling. I have a granddaughter who's 14, and she's in high school. She's an athlete, but she's really, really confused, I guess you'd say, about the other girls who were her friends in grade school and also in middle school, but now they've gotten into high school, and the way they dress, the way they talk about their sexuality, the things that they're into, and there's this push-pull, like I really want to be like them, but then I'm an athlete and I shouldn't care about that. But we just are not having those kind of messages for females, both. And as an aging woman too, the plethora of plastic surgery, the need to still look like you're 50 when you're 70 or 40 when you're 60. The pressure on women is not about the divine feminine. It's about a plastic, unreal expectation that is impossible to meet, and it's so fed by the media, and the misogynistic kind of things like Rush Limbaugh would say about women, what he said about the woman who what was her deal?
Sang her flute. She was
Yeah. And so
didn't
that's,
hear that. What did he say?
Called her a slut.
He called her a slut, and he talks about feminazis when he's talking about gay or lesbian women, and just really just horrible. Hopefully kids are doing that. So my point is not to belabor that, but my point is I think there's some really, really poisonous cultural messages about women that completely deny the divine feminine. Mm-hmm. Or if you're going to be the divine feminine, you're going to be like a Barbie doll divine feminine. Mm-hmm. You have to have a perfect figure. So I think it's just an issue for our culture that is an important one when we're talking about feminine spirituality, and where is the feminine principle in our culture. It's very, in our culture, in this country, I think it's very distorted and unrealistic. So that's my little bully guess you'd say.
And I want to share something which is it's a beautiful way for us to recapture in contemporary times the divine feminine. And it's something that Vicki taught me. And that there are so many images of women of how we're expected to be. And that when we shift how we're looking at it, because those images aren't going to go away. The truth is those images aren't going to go. They're starting to shift, which is awesome. They are starting to shift. But that's not going to go away. So if we can shift the way we're looking at them, it can change everything. So let me show you this. It's going to fall. So Vicki, who I studied with for about a year, works with the Dakinis as well, and she has made hundreds. This is the back of it. She's made like she's made hundreds of these and teaches women to make these, and they're to the Dakini. So this is one to the white Dakini.
Oh, she takes.
So she takes contemporary images of women and pulls them together as the goddess. And so you can begin to see women in a different way. These images are from all sorts of magazines. But when you bring them together from the point of view of women as representations of the divine feminine, you can create this amazing, and what this has done for me, because I've looked at this for years, and I looked at a lot of the other ones that she created, I've created some as well, is that when I look at magazines now, the initial is, oh, that's a model. But you can shift your attention to go, there's another representation of the goddess. There's another representation of the goddess. And to then expand that out to there's another representation of the goddess, to then every woman that you see becomes that rather than the
Idealized.
Thank you. Idealized.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think it might be time to stand up and stretch a little bit. And if you can make it off the floor. And as you stretch a little bit, see who a partner might be for about a 5 or 10 minute discussion of what we've been talking about. And go ahead and partner up and spend a few moments talking.
Partner up. Okay. Everybody? Yeah. Live or living, either one is actually perfect. You live here? Yeah, okay, Mama. Right.
Well, I'm going through some things, but I emailed you a thing. That's that one was a yeah, I think we started but okay. And it was and sometimes oh, really? I thought there was one. Okay,
This Saturday.
Yeah, week from yesterday.
Okay, next Saturday.
The 17th.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so she can read the book you got something.
Well, I haven't read EarthTribe. I've read the one you just read.
I'm not going to say that.
We did an eco-field exercise a couple of months ago in Missouri. I've always been with
I'll have to double check this.
Where did I start from? It was a week from. Is it on Saturday? I saw it. She was amazing. And that's a couple of it was so far. It's really regimented. You have to buy a license. Yeah, I read all that. Little mini great cars. Yeah, but they're a little bit fancy inside, and it's like a F1 track. Yeah, totally interesting. Cool. But you were nice to meet you. Yeah, I was really excited to see her. What happened to my partner? There you are. All right. Okay. That was really, yeah, that was my favorite. It's just like that'd be great. Thank you. Do you have a card today? I do. Okay. An outside? I like it. How do you of course, it's and then to me, the stratification is I kind of transfer my point of view. So I've never we did like 10 seconds.
Okay, if you'll come back into
yeah.
So let's just take a few moments and see if you have any comments or questions to direct to any one of our esteemed goddesses.
Yes. You know, the whole time y'all were talking and when you started asking about the contemporary and everything, I was just thinking about the stuff I read about Election Day and what happened with Mercury going retrograde and how everything kind of looked one way and then it just went whoosh.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, it's like the Divine Feminine is working for our president. And because he is pro-women and he's pro what, you know, the aspects of the Divine Feminine that I see happening in our country. And anyway, that it just came up and I got like chill bumps from head to toe, and I loved hearing the stories because I had not had any experience or didn't even know about the Tibetan Divine Feminine. I've heard of Dakinis, but just saw them, you know, floating around. So thank you all so much.
Yeah,
great.
I would love to, and I don't know if you can answer it, but I'm going to throw it out anyway. With the 2012 and everything shifting, and supposedly the Western woman is going to save the world, do you have any sense of what that's, how that's supposed to? Supposed to, you know. So do y'all have anything on that, or get any sense of
Well,
that?
the Dalai Lama said that probably, 2 years ago, maybe. At least, that the shift in consciousness was going to have to come through women. And I definitely believe that the empowerment of women is essential to shifting the trajectory that this world, this globe has been on. And, you know, there are many, many feminine movements in third world countries that are really heroic. You talk about heroic, some of those stories are amazing. You know, how women are standing up in
well, the Pakistani girl.
Yes, the Pakistani girl. I
Wedding.
wanted to say something about her today. I forgot
Yes.
that. And women in all of those very fundamentalist Muslim countries who are like a woman who her younger brother went out with a girl of a different caste, and so the punishment was for the sister, an adult woman, to be gang raped by like 15 men, which she endured that, but she prosecuted every one of them and took them to court, and they were prosecuted. So that's a hero to me. That is a heroic woman, and we just need to hear those stories because there are women doing these kinds of things in countries all over the world, standing up to the atrocities toward women and girls. And but I remember the Dalai Lama saying that it wasn't going to happen from the males, it was going to happen from the women.
That's very true, and I think it's happening. I mean, this is why I wanted to start to do a dialogue like this. But and so I think that conditions and circumstances are coming together beyond anybody's control for this forward movement for the sacred feminine. My only concern is that we not get polarized around it, because if the sacred feminine at the level of the mundane world stands for anything in terms of values, in leadership, I mean, for me is a value of radical inclusion. And many people talk about connection and forming community, radical inclusion. So just to be careful that first of all, you have to develop the values of the sacred feminine inside your own mind stream before you can open your mouth or do anything. So making sure that you actually have authentic something to share that's coming from that way. And we definitely don't do it in a way that polarizes. It's not about men versus women. There are at all. And that's the only part that really scares me a little bit. Some things about the 2012 thing.
Yeah. And for me, the opportunity with 2012, there is an energetic shift happening, and it can go any way. There was a pivot with the election that we were like, no, who knows? And I think that's a microcosm of what's happening on a much, much bigger scale. We don't know. And anybody who says we know what's going to happen, we don't know. we're in this place of incredible mystery, which is really the realm of the feminine.
Isn't that
Yeah.
part of
Yes.
the Buddhist
Well,
something
is
you're
the-
supposed to know? You know that you don't know what you know, or something.
And it's definitely for Buddhists, this is a great time because this is the time of creation. For Buddhist philosophy, you create your own reality. You create who you are, you create your experiences. So for Buddhists, this is great. I mean, the world is a mess, but it's a period now of creation.
Exactly.
So it's like, wow.
Yeah, and same with the Toltec. Everything is up in the air. How wonderful. So what do we want to create? And it's about each of us taking back our power to choose what we want to create. And for me, it's about being ready for anything. So to not polarize and to really, can we come into the mystery so deeply? Can we embrace the angel of death so thoroughly and be absolutely in this moment and say, whatever's going to show up, I will be present. Whatever's going to show up, I will show up as well with whatever is arising, however it manifests. I will show up as well, and to keep surrendering to thinking that we know what it's going to look like, because we just don't. And that's what the grace is right now, is that place of getting to each of us find our center and our connection and our fluidity, so that we can be in service however we need to be in service. Because I really believe all of us are being called to be in service right now. All of us are being called to be in service in whatever different way. And when we can let go of what our service is supposed to look like, then we can allow it to be called through us.
And that's the
Out
feminine
into
way.
the world.
That's the feminine way, to respond to the moment, 100%. You know, from a place of being authentic and not thinking and planning and organizing. That's I really like what you said.
Yeah, I think of a quotation from Ilya Prigozhin. He said, the leaders of today will be affected to their ability to meet and dissipate chaos. So if you meet and take chaos in, the feminine principle, take in, and then
Transform it.
transform, into coherence. And other questions?
And then the feminine principle creates chaos sometimes in order to evoke transformation.
Like volcanoes.
Hurricanes, bikini eruptions.
I don't remember any of your names, but Judith. So, because you mentioned that you were Methodist at some point, can you reflect on that just a little bit? And so, at what point? I know you did a little bit in your stories, but so from whatever period until you started
Well, my dad was a very devout Christian and a very sweet, gentle man. My mother, it turns out, was really more of a mystic, so that was an interesting combination, although that didn't really develop. And it was a good foundation for me. I mean, I think it was very familial. My family was German. It was a very small German church. The minister actually preached in German. I had no idea what he was ever saying because I was with my coloring books in the back pew. But so I don't regret that at all. But I think at some point the structure of the church and the message was not congruent with where I was. Actually, my father died when I was quite young, and I sort of was pissed off at Jesus and God about that. Yeah. And then I just moved away from that. So, without rancor, good word. I wasn't angry about it. It was not fundamental. It wasn't really fundamentalism like it is now. So there wasn't the stuff about your body and all of that being sinful. It was just bland. I would say it just didn't have any juice. It was just a very bland kind of da-da-da-da-da. I love the singing. And so I think it was a good foundation for me, actually,
to move into somewhere. Do you mind if I ask, did you feel kind of that something was missing, possibly? Yeah. And that you were searching or seeking something else in the process?
Yeah, I did. I just felt boring. If you can say that about something, it was just kind of boring. There wasn't anything that was, Jesus loves you, and That's great. I don't mean that at all disrespectfully. I think the cosmic Christ is very, very important. I think the message, but I don't really see Christians per se really living through the messages that Christ brought. So that was disillusioning to me, that it seemed very hypocritical that Jesus would say, love your neighbor as yourself, and then people were racist and were hated women. And so there was too much contradiction for me in the message, and not enough embodied in the world of my compatriots in the Christian church.
Yes.
I agree and follow all of these paths. This is my favorite topic I'm very passionate about. I also attend a Sophia Gnostic group, and just for a paradigm shift, that they teach that Mary Magdalene was and is co-equal with Yeshua, that she is she's the Christ of feminine aspect, and the personal embodiment. Her life was so different than Jesus. The way that they came to their experiences, but that she really is the apostle of the apostles, and a lot of that wasn't oral tradition until recently, and it's been written. But I've heard every one of you say this. It's about unity, because we all have that within. We all have the feminine and the masculine within us. And the second you say one is better than the other, you put that outside of yourself, and then you just own it. But realizing that we are all of it. It is about unity. It is. I am feminine and masculine, and you and you and you, and to love that and embrace that and take the positive and not to disown and put down and separate.
Which is, like you said, fuel past judgment.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just shifting a little bit, what did the three of you learn from each other, if anything, today?
I think one thing that we all did in our own way was, let's bring up the archetypes of the feminine that have kind of, don't have enough media coverage. Understand? Let's, whatever it is. So for me, it's interesting that we all approached it similarly. Let's find our roots, our archetypes, our paradigms, and let's share that. So for me, that was great that we kind of approached it in the same way. Yeah, and that was really impressive.
Well, and for me, I really was enlightened about the feminine deities in the Buddhist tradition, because I have very little knowledge about Tibetan Buddhism other than just things that come up, that Thich Nhat Hanh and some people that, in that I like to read, in Dalai Lama, etc. But your knowledge of the feminine deities is really wonderful, and the sense that the power of that, in spite of the erasures, which is too bad. I really agree that's too bad, but that they're there. And it makes
there's
sense.
the cultural dimension, which is a mess, but still that doesn't impact or change the authenticity or the value of the spiritual dimension at all.
Right.
So that's
fortunate
fortunate for that. I would like to bring up the mundane world to reflect the spiritual principles in the Buddhist cultures. It's a big, tall order. But nevertheless, the fact that they don't, it doesn't degrade the value of the authenticity of the spiritual values of the feminine. And so there's still a lot to rejoice in, still a lot to connect to, find guidance and wisdom from in the Tibetan tradition, despite this dissonance at an ordinary level.
Well, culture and spirit are really hard to bring together. It's very, it's interesting.
Well, that's kind of the problem that we have been talking about, is how to bring culture and spirit together.
I feel like what I've learned is just the whole process of this, of how fun the process has been of Coral going, Yeshe has a vision, she's going to email you. Okay. And then getting an email and being like, oh, that sounds like fun. And it was very much like we had no idea what we were going to do, but it sounded like fun, whatever it was.
We're going to jump off the cliff together.
Yeah. Not the physical cliff.
Yeah. And so just the sweetness of how it evolved, and then us both feeling like, well, maybe there's someone else that we should invite. And Judith's name popped up. Yeah. Yeah. So it was like, ooh, okay, let's pull Judith in. And it's been very, very. The whole process has been really sweet, and the unfolding, and the testing, and the opening to the mystery again of what was going to come through here. So it's been really lovely, and to have so many of you respond to that.
Turnout,
yeah.
I feel. Wow.
Well, you sort of gave birth to the idea, and now it's made manifest.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But together
The journey
made
of it.
manifest, yeah?
Yeah.
It's like totally through the matrix of interconnection. So much is possible. I rely on that power.
Good. Well, just want to thank you for also including me and in the process. And Judith and HeatherAsh and I just returned from Teotihuacan, where one evening in the dead of night we went into a cave together, went down 6 meters and then 103 meters under the ground to this beautiful cave that had 4-leaf clover, little caves around the side, each exactly in an ordinal direction.
Wow.
And as we sat there, I felt like we were being birthed in the womb of the Great Mother, and I felt that here this morning as well. So I want to say something.
Yes, thank you. It's been a really rich process, and I think that everyone will take home a lot to think about and take into their heart.
Great job, Amara.
Yeah.
Yes.
And thanks for Coral for being the bridge. Can we all stand up and do a circle to close? Yeah.